Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Jeremy Jason Inman.
I'm Ashley Vampire Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University, because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character, construct, or super team from popular culture and teach you everything you need to know about it in about an hour, except when we don't, like today.
Yes, today is going to be a list discussion episode of Geek History Lesson about the best DC comic Elseworlds stories. Now, if you don't know what that is, we're going to get to it. We're going to explain it. Just hold your damn horses, is what I would say.
This is the internet. I want it now.
Shh, quiet, internet. That's what I say to you. Quiet. This lesson actually was suggested by Mind University students. It was suggested by at Dennis J2109, at WM Burke 88, and at Josh Pinto.
Nice.
I'm going to give a special Josh Pinto thanks for not using numbers in your name. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just admire.
You think it's like Pinto Beans or like Pinto like a horse?
I think it's probably his actual name.
Oh.
Let's not be insulting to Josh. All right. Thank you all for suggesting this lesson. I was actually quite surprised when I checked in our archives and saw that people did want us to talk about Elseworlds stories. Now, this is all in honor of the new DC animated film Gotham by Gaslight. That's the reason why we're going to talk about DC Comics Elseworld Tales. Now, Ashley, I have the full, long description about what Elseworlds are and exactly how long they've been around, but in basic terms, how would you explain a DC Comics Elseworld stories to somebody who has no idea what they are, Ashley?
I would describe them as stories told out of the regular continuity, intentionally done so, because, of course, continuity is this roving concept.
Yeah.
According to Elseworlds, it's everything that's branded Elseworlds, because there's lots of things that I thought were Elseworlds that aren't, like Earth One.
Yeah, that's right. Now, Elseworlds is a publication imprint for a group of comic books produced by DC Comics that basically take place outside of the company's canon. Unlike its Marvel Comics counterpart, What If, ... which bases its stories on a single point of divergence from the regular continuity. Most Elseworld stories instead take place in entirely self-contained continuities, whose only connection to the canon of DC continuity are the presence of basically like Superman, Batman, Robin, whoever you have in them. The first Elseworlds title, appropriately, was Batman by Gaslight is what I almost said. Batman Gotham by Gaslight in 1989 by Brian Augustyn and Mike Mignola, which featured a Victorian age version of the superhero hunting Jack Ripper, which is also the DC animated film now.
I feel like it's a very Mignola-esque concept.
Oh, very much so. To readers of DC comic books, Elseworlds, like Ashley said, can fall under any writing style not affiliated with the current DC comic universe. So, titles like Batman The Dark Knight Returns, or Superman Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, or even the current Batman White Knight aren't technically considered as part of Elseworlds because that little logo is not on there, but they're not in continuity, so they could be. So anyways, that list is very nebulous. We decided to stick to the ones that were officially declared as Elseworlds. Now, this is our 5 best Elseworld tales. These are our opinions. Please, on our social media, please let us know your top 5 Elseworld stories. Ashley, where can they find that?
You can find that on Facebook.com/Geek History Lesson and on Twitter at GHL Podcast. You can also hit us up on our website at GeekHistoryLesson.com.
And just to let you know, of our list, the top 3 from both of our lists will be at the recommended reading at GeekHistoryLesson.com/recommended reading, so you can find them.
Yeah.
Okay, Ashley, let's start it off. Number 5. We're going to start at number 5. Ashley, what is your 5th best Elseworld story of all time? And if I have a number that you have on your list, I'm not going to say. I'm going to save it.
Okay. My number 5 is Kingdom Come by Mark Waid and Alex Ross. Set in the not-so-distant future, the DC universe is spinning inexorably out of control. The new generation of heroes has lost their moral compass, becoming just as reckless and violent as the villains they fight.
Yep.
Basically, all of the Justice Leaguers that you know and love fight all their children. The reason I put this at number 5 instead of higher is because
a lot of people would put this as number 1.
A lot of people would put this as number 1. I think this is a difficult book.
Really, why?
I think you need to know a lot about the DC universe. You have to be a very heavy, regular reader of the universe. You really have to have read Watchmen, I think.
To read Kingdom Come?
There's Watchmen Easter eggs all over it.
That doesn't mean you have to read it, though.
The book that he's writing is in the bookstore that the character passes. Yes. I will show it to you.
Well, I mean, the book, we have to give some context here for people that have no idea what you're talking about. You're talking about Under the Hood, the book that is in Watchmen.
Yeah.
Yes, that book is in Kingdom Come, but that doesn't mean that you have to read Watchmen to read Kingdom Come.
I just mean, like, there's a lot of, because of who Mark Waid is, there's a lot of really deep cut references in Kingdom Come, and I think in order to be able to really enjoy it, you really have to know a lot about the DC Comics universe.
I agree with that. I don't think you have to know a lot about Watchmen.
I just mean that it extends beyond your typical DC canon in order to catch every little reference, which is why the back matter in the Absolute is like 50 pages long. And I think you can read it and you can enjoy it, and you can definitely appreciate the Alex Ross art because it's stunning. It's some of his best work ever, I think, inarguably. But I think to get everything out of it that is intended in that story, I really think there's a lot of work and research that goes in beforehand. And I think as a result, sometimes people pick up Kingdom Come because it is a beautiful cover. It makes a lovely gift.
The art's astounding.
I think sometimes people don't like it because I think at face value, it's very simple.
Well, let's we got the reason why you put it on number 5, but why is it even in your list then? What do you like about it?
I like that it examines a failure because all of these characters who are the parental figures, the sort of old guard, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and their contemporaries, even Dick Grayson, who's Red Robin at that point, in that continuity.
Whose daughter is on the opposite team.
That's true. All of these people that we hold up as heroes, they're presented as fallible sometimes for the first time, depending on what your reading experience has been. I like the future look at the Trinity. I think it's very accurate. Batman has the exoskeleton, which is synonymous with many versions of Batman. I love that Superman goes off to be a farmer. I love the scene where we see him for the first time and he's tilling a field and he's pulling the equipment. Like, he doesn't have oxen. He doesn't have a machine. He's doing it himself. He's working the land. I love his relationship with Wonder Woman there. I think it's really sweet. And I do think that the Easter eggs are very gratifying. Liberty Bell is here, except she's Jessie Quick. Like, there's a lot of great costume designs that never get referenced again. There's a lot of characters who never appear again.
Because they're like future kids.
Yeah,
like
they're alternate versions. Like, Dick Grayson obviously didn't grow up to be Red Robin. He grew up to be Nightwing, but the Red Robin costume comes back later.
The daughter of Wally West is so cool.
She looks amazing.
And then this is the first introduction of Red Robin, and I think that Red Robin costume is so cool.
Yeah, and then it got a little less cool in the redesign. But I think there's a big idea at play here, and I think the art really matches it, and it feels classical in a way that comic art doesn't often feel classical because it is painted. I think the whole package takes comic book superhero storytelling to a different level. But I think in that, I think it's difficult, and I do think it can be dry. So I think it belongs on the list, but I don't think it deserves a top spot.
Sure.
That's why I put it on the list.
And that's totally fine. It's your choice.
It is my choice. What is your number 5?
My number 5, I guarantee you, is a story that I bet not many of our listeners, nor you, have read.
Oh.
It is an Elseworlds story called The Super 7.
I've not read it.
It originally was published in Adventures of Superman Annual number 6 and Superboy Annual number 1. It was a 2-parter. The first part is way better than the second part. Basically, the story is these aliens called the Horde attack Earth, and they say that for every superhero that stops them, they will slaughter a whole city. And to show that they aren't bluffing, they destroy Metropolis, which basically cripples the Justice League. They then break Wally West's leg, they crucify Oliver Queen, and then all the heroes basically leave because the Horde basically becomes unbeatable about this. The story jumps ahead 9 years, and we now see a one-eyed Jimmy Olsen telling the story of this. It all changes when Lana Lang shows up with Jimmy because she works for the Horde, and she reveals that she has the location of Superman. Through this story, they pull together the Justice League because maybe there's a chance that Lois is alive, because Lana has a note that has a piece of Lois's hair and shows it to Superman, and it says, the unending battle continues, which of course is like one of these catchphrases that Superman has. It's really got a lot of great little character moments. Like this is Hal Jordan Green Lantern, because this is before Kyle Rayner. He's been burying the bodies of Coast City, because Coast City was one of the cities that they got destroyed. A Superboy shows up that is a clone of Superman. Of course, this is during the 90s. And then we learn that there only one hero of the Justice League never quit, and that was Batman. And he's grizzled as hell, and he's got like armor on him and stuff like that, and he never stopped fighting. And he spends most of the story really angry at the rest of his teammates because they all gave up. Now, again, it's a 2-part annual story, because there was one year when DC used to do Elseworlds. They'd always do them themed, and Elseworlds was the theme at that time. There's a lot of the characters have buzz cuts because they've been working in prison camps. They, of course, have leather jackets. But to me, it was the changes of like how far the League go that always made this story stick out to me, and still make it remember to this day. It's really the Justice League mixed with the most 90s of 90s-ish, and the design elements can be a little bit much, and the artwork in the second part of the storyline's a little silly, but I think the story beats of it really are really, really strong. And the reveal of who Lex Luthor is, or where Lex Luthor is in this storyline, I think is really interesting. And the idea of where Superman ends the storyline at the end of this, I don't want to spoil it for you, is really good. It's really hard to find, but I guarantee you could find it in a back issue bin. But the Super 7, this kind of weird Mad Maxian alien invasion of what would happen if the alien invasion actually hadn't been beat by the Justice League. What if they actually lost? And that's what this storyline is. And I think it's really cool. And I think it's definitely, that's why it's always stuck out to me. I think it's really, really solid.
Nice.
So there you go. Well, Ashley, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is a little book called Superman Secret Identity. Set in the real world, Secret Identity examines the life of a young Kansas man with an unfortunate name of Clark Kent. All Clark wants to do is be a writer, but his daily life is filled with taunts and jibes of his peers, comparing him to the other Clark Kent, the one with superpowers, until one day when Clark awakens to discover that he can fly. So I read this when I first started reading Superman stories.
Was this was this a suggestion for me, I believe? Or no?
No.
Okay.
It was not. I don't think so.
Okay, I'm just curious. I didn't remember. I really like this book.
Anyway, and the story unfolds in a really interesting way. It was pitched to me as this is a Superman story without Superman. And it kind of is.
Yeah, that's true.
They're doing, at the time of this recording, they're doing the Batman version of this.
Creature of the Night.
Yep. I look forward to the Wonder Woman version in 10 more years.
I know. Kurt Busiek, get off your butt.
Well, he's got other stuff going on.
He's got Astro City to keep
Autumn Lands is still happening. He's a busy man. But what I appreciate about this story is that it does examine the legacy of Superman in our real world where we all exist. And it also presents you with a person who's not exactly like him, but he's another reluctant hero. Like, Kal-El doesn't come to Earth to be our savior, and this version of Clark Kent doesn't want to be Superman. It's something that happens to them, and they have to choose to be that good and that pure, and I think that's exemplary of who this character is. I think the art is absolutely stunning.
Stuart Immonen.
Who also, he's just an amazing artist.
Oh, yeah.
Drew great X-Men stories.
And Superman stories. Before this. He was on Action Comics before this.
And then I also super like his daughters, and they turn out to have superpowers. Spoiler alert. And I always really wanted them to make action figures of these characters, but it's never, ever, ever going to happen. But I think the storytelling device here is wildly clever. I think it would make a great, hour-long movie, or animated movie, or I don't know, made for TV movie adaptation.
It would be a great DC animated movie. It would be a DC animated movie that would win awards.
And I think it's a story that doesn't get enough recognition or enough
didn't sell well.
credit, but it's amazing.
I know.
And it's a great book. It's a great book to sell to people, because often someone can come in and say, my boyfriend likes Superman and he's read every Superman story, but you can give them a book like Secret Identity and then they've never read it before. So yeah, I appreciate that it takes the Elseworlds story to our world, but it
Sure.
still exemplifies everything that makes Superman what he is and the icon that he is. And I'm so thrilled that Batman is getting the adaptation right now, although I think Secret Identity's better.
Well, I don't think you can make that judgment until Creature of the Night ends.
That's fair. But I do think Secret Identity is better. I really love it. So I had to put it on my list, and I put it at number 4. How about you? What is your number 4?
My number 4 is a story. It's a Superman story. It's
Imagine that.
It's not the one that you picked. It's Superman Red Sun. Red Sun is the Mark Miller, Dave Johnson, Killian Plunkett story about baby Kal-El, and it's not E-L in this book, it's L, crashing in Soviet Russia instead of Kansas. It follows the Soviet Superman from his first appearance in the 1950s and through the Cold War arms race, where it focuses on superhumans, through the 70s and the 80s, and it shows that Superman controls the USSR and Luthor becomes the president of the United States. Superman in the storyline becomes an all-powerful despot, and he starts brainwashing the people that disagree with him. He has a war with the Amazons. Batman martyrs himself against it.
Yeah.
And then basically, in the end, the Man of Iron, as he's called in this book, decides to just live among his people and let his people control their destiny. And then it has quite possibly one of the greatest endings of any Superman storyline of all time. And I'm just going to spoil it right now because I don't think it's a major spoiler. The epilogue is sent billions of years in the future, and it puts an interesting spin on Superman's origin where it reveals that the baby comes from the future.
Yeah.
Which, if you know anything about Superman, you know that is the first origin of Superman that Siegel and Schuster came up with. That Superman was not an alien. He was a person from the future that was sent back to the past to save the future. It's basically the ultimate what if storyline given to Superman. And it's a little... You know, Mark Miller has these tropes that he uses.
Yes.
And he definitely uses them in this storyline.
I think in the Batman section is where it's most obvious.
And that's the reason why this storyline is low on the list for me, is because there is a little bit too much of the Mark Miller tropes in this storyline. But I will say this. This is the storyline that proved to me that it is a damn shame that Mark Miller never got a run at the regular Superman title. And I hope that he still gets it someday. I don't think he will because I think he's a powerful movie producer now and he doesn't need DC. But fun fact, many people don't know this. Red Sun was Mark Miller's last DC work.
Interesting.
It was the last thing he did before he did the Ultimate, stuff like that. But the artwork's great. Again, it is a very what if storyline, but it is so good. But there's some hinks to it.
It's another one that could be adapted into an amazing animated movie.
Oh, it'd be so good as an animated movie.
Cut out the nonsense.
It would be amazing. Yeah, because to be honest with you, the Batman part of it is my least favorite part.
I agree, but there's a wonderful panel where he saves Lois.
Yep.
And it's a classic pose, and she's looking at him, and even though it is this examination of Superman through a different lens, it's still everything you want Superman to be at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Now, before we get to our next choice, we want to talk about our sponsor, Leesa.
Yes.
They are an amazing, innovative, direct-to-consumer online mattress brand that works in any alternate universe. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what Elseworlds you are. You want to sleep on these damn fine, comfy beds. They're available in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Germany on many Earths in the multiverse. And they are an American-made mattress that ships compressed in a box to your door. I want to say, when we got the box to my mattress, it was in a heavy box, but you get a little bit of added joy because you get to watch the mattress do like a reverse space vacuum on your bed frame. It's like whoosh. So that's like a little bit of entertainment that you don't know what you're getting with your mattress. Plus, they're an amazingly good company, like generally good. They are like superhero good because they plant one tree for every mattress sold, and they donate 1% of each of their employees' time to volunteer for local causes.
Nice.
So they make comfy mattresses, and they're decent human beings. That's a rarity in this world. You can get $100 off the Lisa mattress using the URL that I'm going to say to you right now, lisa.com/geekhistorylesson. Or excuse me, lisa.com/geekhistory. Don't go to Geek History Lesson. That's not us.
Nope.
And Lisa is spelled LEESA, and use the promo code Geek History. You can try that mattress out in your home, again, on any Earth and any alternate reality for 100 nights, risk-free with free shipping. Again, that is lisa.com/geekhistory, excuse me, and the promo code is Geek History. Thank you so much to lisa.com for sponsoring this episode. And now, Ashley, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is something that I think is not, going to be on your list anywhere. It is Robin Annual number 3, The Narrow Path, written by Chuck Dixon with artist Enrique Villagrán. I totally nailed his last name.
I think you did.
Yeah. In 19th century Japan, Robin is a young ninja who must fight to protect his daimyo's life from a cult of assassins that killed his mentor. A young samurai must fulfill his master's dying wish, even if it kills him. I really like this because it is at the height of my favorite Robin run of all time. I think the samurai comparison is incredibly apt for anybody in the Batman family. And I think by giving Tim the quest of having to fulfill the last wishes of a dying parent or parental figure is interesting because his parents didn't pass away until after he had become Robin. So you get to see a more extreme version of this character than what we were seeing in the regular continuity. And I think annuals have the job of both celebrating but standing separate from the current continuity. And I think this is a really, really neat way to do it. Feudal Japan looks amazing in the art. It looks great for the setting. And I think that's also exemplified by the fact that we are getting a Batman Ninja movie that is set with very similar aesthetics very soon. So if you're hyped for that movie, I would really, really recommend picking this up. If you're a Tim Drake fan, I would recommend picking this up. And it's honestly a single issue. So if you just like Batman, you should pick up The Narrow Path because it's a one and done. It's a very quick read.
I just want to point out, I looked up the cover because I have not read this and this is not on my list. This is the same year as My Super 7. It's the same.
Oh, no way.
It's the same Elseworlds banner because as soon as you said it was an annual, I was like, I bet this is the same one.
Oh, that's so funny.
But it's the exact same year of annuals where they had this Elseworlds.
Oh, well, I bet you could probably pick both of them up for like a quarter.
You can find them all in the quarter bin. Yeah, totally.
Go check those out. It's a really cool examination of Robin and what it means to be a legacy character, which is something that's deeply, deeply important in the DC Comics continuity and something that Tim Drake was really awesome at. And he has a dumb ponytail.
How did you first read it? When you were picking up...
I pulled this out of a quarter bin like ages and ages ago.
Cool.
I wish I kept it. I probably didn't. And then when we were going through our reference list, it was on there, and I was like, "Oh snap! This definitely has to be on my list." Yeah, because I'm gonna be honest. I was nervous that you and I were going to have a variation of the same list,
and that is a problem, definitely. But I don't know if you have my number 3 or not. I'm curious to see if you've read my number 3.
Okay.
It is a well-known one, but I don't know if you've read it.
All right. Well, lay it on me.
Have you said enough about Robin Ronan? I'm going to read it now.
It's called The Narrow Path.
Robin Ronan.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I'm going to call it.
If someone wants to make me a custom action figure, I'll pay you money for it. Please tweet me.
That'd be a good-looking action figure.
It would be amazing.
Yeah, that's a good costume.
There should be an Elseworlds line of action figures.
It just wouldn't sell.
I know, but they look so good.
It just wouldn't sell. There was a Red Sun.
I know, and
New Frontier.
I know,
so.
I don't have it.
All right,
you go ahead. Tell me your number 3.
My number 3 is all about a piece of hardware. JLA the Nail.
Oh, I've read that.
Is it on your list, though?
It's not on my list.
There you go. See? The theme of Alan Davis, by the way, is an amazing comic book creator. He's a great writer. He's an amazing artist. He's a better artist than he's a writer. But he has some great runs on like Excalibur, and he made this great one and done Elseworlds miniseries, JLA the Nail. Jonathan and Martha Kent get a flat tire.
Yeah.
And they never find the rocket ship that brings baby Kal-El to Earth, which creates a butterfly effect which ripples throughout the DC universe. Some of the changes that have a result are Lex Luthor becomes mayor of Metropolis.
No!
And he's able to whip up a successful anti-metahuman sentiment. a Green Lantern who operates under the jurisdiction of powerful foreign beings. Like, so this is how he sells the Justice League, excuse me. He like throws against the allegiances of the Atlantean Aquaman. He's like, oh, Green Lantern works for aliens. There's the inhuman Martian Manhunter. And then also contributing to the Fuhrer is Oliver Queen, who was part of the Justice League, but then was maimed because he's a human, and now he's totally against the Justice League. And then there's even TV personality Jimmy Olsen. And then the Justice League even has bigotries against one another, and they're an impossible team. JLA the Nail, I remember reading about it in Wizard Magazine and being like, there's no way this book is any good. And there is some silly parts of it. But the Alan Davis art really, really makes it stand above the test. And to be honest with you, it's such an interesting idea, just like Red Sun, where you're just like, oh, what would have happened if Martha and Jonathan never got there? Like, what would have happened? Like, you know, and this book does reveal what happens to that little baby space alien. Like, you do see Kal-El in this book, and it reveals what happened to him. But it's the interesting idea
he
that
dies in a farmer's field. That'd be so dark.
Eaten by a coyote.
Oh.
That's spoilers.
Not.
Some possums and a coyote. Eat baby Kal-El.
Awful.
But it's really interesting to really focus on this idea that Superman was the first superhero. He is the linchpin of all superheroes of all time. And it's the idea that without him, the rest of the DC universe doesn't gel. And I really like that idea because I do believe that Superman is the linchpin of the DC universe. DC publisher Dan DiDio always once said to me that he said that you can look back at DC Comics history and you can see the times when DC is not strong and not putting out good stories. And he said that's always times when Superman is not good and always failing. And that to me was always like, I was like, oh, that's a reason why DC Rebirth was so great, because Superman was so strong. And JLA the Nail is literally the personification of that idea through this. It's really good. And they just made it like a super awesome deluxe cover of it. There's also a sequel called Justice League Another Nail.
Yeah.
It's not as good.
They never are.
But they made it because the first one sold like crazy, and nobody this book blew up when it came out, and nobody expected it to blow up. But it's one of the finest. This as well would make a great... How cool would it be if the DC animated movies like flipped to doing Elseworlds tales?
They should, because I think in the Elseworlds you can take more liberties in adaptation, and I think people will be less crotchety about it because it's already set outside of... It doesn't affect your headcanon that much.
And they've
stronger aesthetic choices.
They've actually already done a couple Elseworld tales. If you think about Gods and Monsters is an Elseworlds tale.
Yeah, I wanted to put that on my list so bad.
Oh, as a movie?
Yes.
I wouldn't have allowed it.
I knew it. I knew you would have been like, that doesn't count.
I wouldn't have allowed it. No. But Justice League of America, The Nail, such a good book. Ashley, what's your number 2?
I am number 2.
I am number 2.
Well, you ruined it because you already talked about Red Sun.
Well, give us your reasons. Why? Okay, you put it number 2. Why number 2?
I put it number 2, and I put it above Secret Identity. I think Secret Identity is a better executed story, and I think it is a better executed concept. I put Red Sun higher than it because I didn't read Superman comics for most of my life, and Red Sun was the first Superman comic where I was like, oh, I liked this and I get it. I thought it was...
Ashley only likes evil Superman.
That's not true. I also love Dad Superman and Bearded Superman.
Dad Superman's actually evil Superman. We all get it, right, people?
Are you saying you got to be evil to impregnate a human woman?
No, you got to be evil to like be a dad. All dads listening to this right now, you're evil. Look in your mind. Look, dads, you're driving on the road right now. If you have a child, a human being of some type, or cat. Well,
you forced a woman to grow a human being inside her body. That's pretty evil.
Dads, look up in that rearview mirror if you're driving. Look in your eyes. Do it right now. You know you're evil. All right. All right, keep going.
I was just really struck by how creative the storytelling was and what a great flip it was. And I recommended this, and I continue to recommend it to people a lot. Because it is it's an examination of the idea of what the world was when Superman landed here. Because, there's lots of nice people in Russia. He could have landed in a nice Russian farmer's field and wound up being just fine. But that was the time of the the beginning of the Red Scare. In America.
They could have done a variation of the story, too, where he landed in Nazi Germany as well.
You also could have done a thing where he landed in America and some not nice people found him.
Sure. But there is actually a multiversity story all about that.
There is. But I appreciate that not only is it an examination of who Superman is, but it's through the lens of what America thought of the world at the time when Superman was created. And I appreciate it on that level as well. And with the exception of the Batman thing, which is probably cool if you're a 14-year-old boy. Shout out to the 14-year-old boys who listen. I do think that every character gets a really neat moment. Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, like everyone who shows up, Wonder Woman gets something cool to do. And then Batman is just like insane.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
Because I've heard this discussion happen with Elseworlds too. There is a danger with Elseworlds stories. And I think it's maybe the reason why Elseworlds kind of went away. There's a danger that when you're telling an Elseworlds story, it sort of always becomes a Justice League story. Like Superman Red Sun.
Because you want to play with all the toys in the toy box.
Superman Red Sun's a Superman story. Does it really need Batman in it?
Absolutely not.
No,
and frankly, it doesn't need Wonder Woman either.
It doesn't need Wonder Woman in it either.
And it would have been...
Or Green Lantern.
No, it would have been just fine. It would have probably been a tighter story.
Yep.
I don't know what editorial's like if they're coming in and saying, this is great, put Batman
But unless you're making like JLA the Nail.
Yes.
I think like there is something to be said that you don't need to see because correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've read Batman Gotham by Gaslight, but doesn't some of the Justice League show up in that as well?
Yes, they do, yeah.
Yeah, and I that'll be interesting once we see the animated movie.
I don't think they'll be in the movie.
I don't think they will either.
I will say this too. I do think that in DC, Elseworlds also falls into a trope of what if Superman didn't land in Kansas? Like there are a lot of stories that want to examine that because he is such an important piece of iconography and he is so inherently American, like American heartland core values.
Yeah, part of his origin is that he wouldn't be as nice as he would be if it wasn't for Martha and Jonathan.
Yes.
So that's why that's a big story. Is like what happens if we take him away from Martha and Jonathan?
But there are. I mean, if you're going to go and look at any of these lists, like and do a deep dive on every. There's a lot of Superman Elseworlds where he's not, where he lands somewhere else.
There's one where he lands in Martha and Thomas Wayne's front yard.
Yes, yeah. That one's okay.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's not great.
We'll talk about that a little bit more in the honorable mentions.
Yeah. So Red Sun, because it's
That was your number 2.
That's my number 2.
Number 2.
What's your number 2, Jason?
Well, I'm glad you finally asked. My number 2
about action figures. I'm sorry.
Is one you've already talked about.
Oh, good.
Kingdom Come.
Oh, why did you put it so high?
Well, I think Alex Ross and Mark Waid's dystopian take on the future of the DC universe is an amazing storyline. And I think there's a reason why Kingdom Come is one of the best storylines in the DC universe and why the people. Now, I disagree with several of the points you made. That I do agree that this is a very dense story, but I think it's a dense story in the way that Star Wars is a dense story. That when you watch Star Wars for the first time, you don't know half those people in the cantina. They don't name them or any of this stuff like that. But if you watch the movie the first time and you're like, oh, Luke's kind of cool. I think Kingdom Come's the same thing. You're watching Superman. Kingdom Come is Superman's storyline. It really is. It's advertised as a Justice League story, but no, it's a Superman storyline because he's the focal point. And I think that with Kingdom Come, there is so much that if you want to go back, you can get something new every single time. It is one of those that I would never recommend as your first DC story. But as your 4th or 5th, yes. I think that's great. But I think you lose a little bit of this story if you don't basically know who the Trinity are. Because I kind of think you need to know who they are because to understand their decisions and their legacy. Now, another thing that I think is so good in Kingdom Come is the reason why Superman retires, which is the Joker murderizes the Daily Planet and kills Lois. I think that's really good. And then I also think that actually, no, that doesn't make Superman retire. What makes Superman retire is that Magog, who is this new who is a joke about Cable, the X-Men character that Rob Liefeld with so many patches, stuff like that. Magog kills Joker, and that's what makes Superman be like, I'm done. Which I think is very interesting. I also think that there's something really interesting, and this was the first story to do it, pitting Captain Marvel against Superman. I think that was a really interesting idea. And then
I think this is a tough book to read if you don't know who Captain Marvel is. Because I read it when I didn't know who Captain Marvel was. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know who this person is. I don't know why I'm supposed to. And you can tell it's supposed to be epic. Which isn't. And I don't think that everyone who's dipping their toe into DC knows who Shazam is.
I'll give you that. I will concede that point. I think there's enough in the story to understand who he is. And I think basically all you need to know is that he's a Superman analog, to make that happen. You lose a little bit of the translation of the Billy Batson thing.
Yeah.
Like, they don't understand. That doesn't quite make sense because Billy Batson now looks like Captain Marvel. But there's something really cool with the idea of this amazing finality of the DC universe. And in a way, I kind of all the final storylines of Heroes, I kind of feel like Kingdom Come's the most accurate. Like, I kind of feel like that, of all the ways the DC universe will go, I kind of feel like that one's the one that hits it on the head the most. And because I like the idea that the cool thing in that storyline is that the Trinity become their parents. Superman becomes a farmer, Wonder Woman becomes an ambassador, and Batman becomes a doctor. Which I think is that's a really, really powerful storyline idea. And I do think Kingdom Come is like one of the best storylines that DC has ever produced. So for me, I was like, there's no way it can't be one of the best Elseworlds.
Interesting.
So there you go. Ashley, we're down to the number one. Number one?
You don't say.
What's your number one best DC Elseworld story?
I think without a doubt it has to be New Frontier, Darwin Cook's. I think that's not surprising to you personally, nope. Jason. The Masked Mystery Men. Oh, that's not where this starts at all. Welcome to 1950s America. My phone flipped around and so it resized everything. A land of promise and paranoia, of glittering cities and segregated slums, of dizzying scientific projects and simmering Cold War conflict. A land without heroes. The Masked Mystery Men who fought for freedom in the Second World War have been outlawed, except they super haven't because all of DC characters now exist. I think this is
by the amazing and late Darwin Cook.
Yes, may he rest in power. To me, this exemplifies everything that's great about comics, and it's a throwback, and it is vintage, and it is nostalgia fever, which we're seeing a lot now. And this it's not an older comic, but it's been around for a decade.
It came out in like the
2008.
No, that was when like the movie came out.
Oh, 2005.
Yeah, it's early like 2000.
All right, so it's like 15 years old.
Yeah.
But I think it does all of those old things with an intelligence that it doesn't feel dated. It feels celebratory. I think it distills the big 7 Justice League characters all down to their most core values. And I think it manages to bring both fun and a maturity to them that I didn't expect going into this. For example, Lois's experience as a wartime reporter, I think, is treated with an appropriate amount of sanitization and sanity because it's a comic book.
Yeah.
But it still feels scary and it still feels heavy and it still feels appropriate to the conflict that were going on in the world at the time. I think it's the best Hal Jordan story maybe ever told.
It's one of his better ones, yeah.
I'm not a huge Hal Jordan person, but you get to see his humanity here, and that's something that's difficult with Hal.
Sure.
I think he often comes off as a real jerk and a braggart.
He does.
one of the best Martian Manhunter stories ever. It's my
Agreed.
preferred Martian Manhunter origin. I live for the page that they recreated in the movie where it's him watching TV and he's transforming into all the different
Speaking
characters.
of Elseworlds animated film, here you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
If you've not, watch the movie, then read the book, I think.
Oh, yeah?
'Cause the book flushes it out a little bit more, so you'll get more of the things
the
that you
book's
like.
better.
The book is better.
But the movie's pretty good.
It is. If you're a Patreon, then you can listen to our commentary on it.
Oh, we did do a commentary. I forgot about that.
I also love the development of the relationship between Superman and Wonder Woman here. You see why they become allies, but I enjoy the friction between them. And I love the way Darwin Cook draws Diana.
She's a giant.
She's a giant. She's curvy.
She's taller than Superman.
She's got her curly hair from the Golden Age, and she looks like she's going to pound Superman into the dust when he criticizes the way she frees the Vietnamese women from their... And I really love that opening scene between them. And then... this is something I've come to appreciate watching the movie with you, Jason, is the speech at the end of the movie and the end of the book.
The new frontier.
Yes.
Here we are.
And that is an actual speech that President Kennedy made.
It is.
And it fits so well into this idea of looking to the future and making your country and the world a better place, which is ultimately what these superheroes stand for or stood for in their Golden Age origins. And it gives me so much hope every time I encounter it in this context. And I think of all the Elseworld tales I've enjoyed, New Frontiers may be the most hopeful. Elseworld stories do have a tendency to go a little dour because you can do more mature storytelling. And I think New Frontiers strikes the right balance again between like, hey, this is kind of dark and kind of scary, but also the world is better for having these people in it.
That speech happened at the 1960 presidential election Democratic National Convention when candidate John F. Kennedy gave that speech. We stand today on the edge of a new frontier, the frontier of the 1960s, frontier of an unknown opportunities and perils, the frontier of unfilled hopes and unify unfilled threats. Beyond that frontier are uncharted areas of science and space, unsolved problems of peace and war, unconquered problems of ignorance and prejudice, and unanswered questions of poverty and surplus. I can't do a Kennedy, but man, we don't have presidential speeches that talk about space anymore. That sucks.
Also, this comic is maybe the best use of the losers ever
it's so good.
in the history of the world. They're so great.
And a concept of DC Universe that I really dislike and has not done well.
Dinosaur Island.
Dinosaur Island.
Yeah, it's great here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is no one should ever touch Dinosaur Island again.
Yeah.
To me, there's just too many good things in New Frontier for it to not be number one. And again, I live for the Martian Manhunter. And
now I will say, and I will say that New Frontier is not on my list, even though it is an Elseworlds. Because I sort of auto-corrected as not being an Elseworlds because it's so close to the actual Justice League of America's origin.
I know.
That I just kind of like naturally make it the origin.
But it was on the list, so I'll put it on my list.
Exactly. I mean, the interesting thing about it is that the Elseworlds-ness of this storyline is the idea that the heroes actually exist at the times they were being published.
Yes.
So Superman has existed since the 1940s. Green Lantern doesn't show up till like 1961.
Yeah, he's quite young.
Like they're tied into that because it's all about the Silver Age.
Mm-hmm. The birth of the Silver Age.
But Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman have been around since the 40s, and then so have the Golden Age people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I sort of like weirdly auto-corrected, but it is an Elseworlds.
Yeah, I love it. I can't say enough nice things about New Frontier. So please, if you haven't checked it out, do yourself a favor and pick it up. How about you? What is your number one Elseworlds tale?
My number one Elseworlds tale is quite possibly one of the best Superman stories of all time. It is the origin of a comic book character that you don't like. Superboy Prime. I'm, of course, talking about Superman's Secret Identity. Of course is my number one. You've already talked about it. But there was no way I could not make this number one. Kurt Busiek, Stuart Immon's, it's great. Yeah, he says in the forward, if you get the trade, like he talks about it, that the idea was the pitch that this was the Superboy Prime origin story because Superboy Prime was the Superboy that lived on our Earth. This was, of course, before they made Superboy Prime a dick. But the idea that like what would be if like basically this Superman existed in the real world and how it builds from there, it is I don't know how you make a top 10 story of Superman and not put this on your list. I think it's so good. And you are exactly right. I brought up like specific moments and my thing about it. Like there's an amazing bit in the second issue where like Clark is ambushed by some government agents and they like analyze him and poke him and like Immerman does like a really good job of like making it gross and disgusting. You're like, oh, and you look at it and you're like, that is what the government would do to Superman.
Absolutely.
If they learn what Superman is. And Clark gets so mad that he destroys the lab. But then the next page is him pulling all the scientists out of the building, which I'm just like, oh my God, that's so perfectly Superman. That is amazing. There's so many real moments. And Stuart Immonen, you might be thinking like, oh, especially if you know his stuff from Ultimate Spider-Man or X-Men, you might be like, he doesn't seem right for this because
yes, he is.
Well, no, but his style has changed.
It has.
His style right now is very cartoony, and I would almost say manga-esque.
Compared to, yeah.
Now, this was back in the day when Stuart Immonen was my favorite artist because he did this amazing Adventures of Superman Action Comics run where he was drawing Superman when Superman had a mullet, and it looks photo-realistic. And that's the Stuart Immonen style that he draws in this book. It looks almost like photos come to life. It's amazing. And again, I kind of blame Next Wave when he did Next Wave Agents of Hate. That's when he became more cartoony and stuff like that. But like back in the day, he was drawing so real. And that's not to say that his art isn't still amazing. It is. It is.
It's just changed.
But it's just changed. Superman's Secret Identity is the best Superman story to give to somebody who's never read a Superman story and to prove to them why the character works. It is an Elseworlds story. And again, Kurt Busiek is sort of doing a weird, loosely tied sequel that's about Batman. And again, we can't judge it. We can't compare it. There's only been like 2 issues out at the time of this recording.
That's true.
And I think there's going to be 4 or 6. I don't know.
I think there's going to be 6.
Yeah. So we're like we're so early into that storyline. That's the same thing. And Superman Secret Identity would read to us if we read it in single issues as well. But because we got to read it all in like one go, I think it makes a big difference about how you absorb a comic book story.
That's true.
Superman Secret Identity is so great. And the scene where Clark realizes his daughters have superpowers and they've been saving people as well. And they're like, let's not tell mom.
Yeah. It's interesting.
So amazing.
Because he's like equal parts kind of crushed, but so proud.
Yeah. And also in this book, he gets a mullet.
Yes, he does.
He grows his hair. He grows his hair. And then he works with a secret agent as well. Like the agent's like, we know somebody's out there. Like, can we just tell you, or can we just, like give you tips about like, oh, we have some agents like over here. We have some people over here. Like, can you go take care of it? And then the scene where his agent like retires is very interesting. It's so good. There's no way. I mean, I know people might be like disappointed that we didn't put Batman, Gotham, and Gaslight or other stuff like that. But again, it's exactly what you talked about. This is a hopeful Elseworlds.
Also, firstly, Gotham by Gaslight, when it was first printed, didn't originally have the Elseworlds logo.
They added it post. Yeah. They added it post.
So there.
Yeah. But Superman Secret Identity is definitely my number 1. All right, those are our lists. Really quickly, let's just recount them. My list, of course, number 5 is the Super 7. Number 4 is Superman Red Sun. Number 3 is JLA The Nail. Number 2 is Kingdom Come, and number 1 is Superman Secret Identity. What were yours, Ashley?
Number 5 is Kingdom Come. Number 4 is Robin Annual. Superman Secret Identity. Number 3. I'm really good at numbers.
How about you start back with 5?
Number 5 is Kingdom Come. Number 4 is Superman Secret Identity. Number 3 is Robin Annual. Number 3, The Narrow Path. Number 2 is Red Sun. And number 1 is New Frontier.
Yes. Now, we're not going to talk about any honorable mentions or anything like that because we're going to save that for our Geek History Lesson Extra podcast. You can find on Patreon. Go over to patreon.com/Jawiin and you can listen to that podcast every single week. Little extra 20 to 15 minutes of more me and Ashley time.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about other Elseworlds that we really like, other Elseworlds that maybe almost made it on this list. But you got to go over there and give us support because that's the only way we can keep this podcast going for free, you crazy monkeys. Now, Ashley, again, they're going to find the top 3 of both of our lists. Where?
On geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading. There are handy dandy little Amazon widgets. You click them, you buy them, and we can recommend you more stuff. And there's a whole bunch of recommended reading from past episodes.
I guarantee you're going to start off your 2018 right if you read JLA, New Frontier, and Superman Secret Identity as our number ones. Those are some damn good comic books. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. You can also leave us a 5-star review over there. I forgot to grab our newest member of the GHL Honor Roll. I apologize to whoever that was.
Well, they'll be in the next episode.
But they'll be in an episode in the very, very far future. Don't forget to suggest future episodes, just like the awesome people. And where can they do that, Ashley?
You can do that at geekhistorylesson.com, facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, and on Twitter at GHL Podcast. There's a bunch of ways to contact us in all of those places.
Yeah, see, no nail is going to stop my pickup truck from thinking at Dennis J2109, at WM Burke 88, and at Josh Pinto. Thank you guys so much for creating some Elseworlds talk. You guys can suggest discussions as well.
Yeah.
We'll totally do that. You can find me on Twitter at Jawiin, Jawiin. Ashley's on Twitter at Ashley V. Robinson. And where's the podcast Twitter, Ashley?
At GHL Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening to Geek History Lesson. I am Jeremy Jason Inman.
I am Ashley Vampire Robinson. Professor Jeremy, why don't you dismiss the class?
Goodbye.